I adore reading fantasy books, and to be completely honest with you, I often find myself getting the most sucked into the story whenever there's a romance subplot introduced. So when I found out about the concept of fantasy romance books, I was elated because that sounded exactly up my alley. However, a lot of the most popular fantasy romance books aren't really my thing, or they tend to get bad reviews from people whose opinion I trust. I have scoured the internet for 3 fantasy romance books that I think will truly align with my and your tastes, and I'm gonna read them. Hello everyone, my name is Leonie, welcome. Let me show you the books that I'm going to be reading for this video. The first one is The Serpent and the Wings of Night. This is an enemies to lovers, and I specifically heard that this one is really good at also developing the fantasy aspects of the story, even though the main focus is on the romance. Then we have Bitterthorn, which is a gothic romance between a witch in a castle and a young girl from the valley. This basically sounds exactly like Uprooted, which is one of my favorite books of all time, except the romance is between 2 women. And lastly, I'm going to read Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This is a YA novel, and everything I know about it is that it's rivals to lovers, which honestly is all I need to know. But I'm gonna start with The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. And thus began my search for a copy of The Serpents and the Wings of Night. The thing about romance fantasy that I found is that it's really hard to get your hands on, at least in the Netherlands. The physical copy, I just could not find it anywhere except for like the hardcover for like 40 euros, and then with like a lot of shipping costs. So that wasn't an option. The audiobook I can't find anywhere. So I decided, you know what, maybe I'll just read it as an ebook, because I have an iPad and I can do the thing now where I read an ebook on my iPad, even though I don't really like reading off screens. I'm just gonna give it a try. And then I also couldn't find the ebook anywhere, because apparently this book is only available to buy from Amazon. So I was forced to get the Kindle app, forced to make an Amazon account, because that was the only place that I could get it, which is really annoying. I just don't like how Amazon has its grubby little hands on everything. But I think I have it now. I don't understand anything. Ah, there we go. Okay, so I have the ebook here, and I started reading like the prologue. Honestly, kind of taken aback by the fact that this book is apparently about vampires. I didn't know that. I didn't know we were still doing that. I'm low-key scared, but also like kind of excited. I haven't read a vampire book in like 10 years. So yeah, this is also going to be my first ebook reading experience. I've just never been an ebook person, but maybe I will now. However, one of my pet peeves when books do this... Oh, no, I didn't want to do that. Oh, okay, I clearly don't know how to work this thing. I don't like it when books do this thing where it's like crack, bam, all caps. And this book does this a lot. Like this stuff, it just makes it feel like unprofessional or something. It's a personal pet peeve of me. Okay, hello. My experience with ebooks so far, really great. I never thought that being able to read hands-free would be such a life-changing experience. Like when I'm sitting in bed, I can just lay it down and then I can just boop, hands-free, continue reading. Also, I read so much faster. Still don't like reading off the screen. My eyes are really not happy with it. So an e-reader might fix that problem, but consider me sold on the e-booking. Hello! Okay, I wanted to share with you guys my new watch. I feel very stylish. I got a new Nordgreen watch, and they are also sponsoring this segment of the video. This is the new one that I got from them. You've probably seen it in the video. It's completely black dial, Everything fits with the dark clothes that I usually wear. And they have a ton of timeless designs, which I really like because that way I know that I'm probably still gonna like this even 10 years from now, and I'm not just following trends. If you don't know, Nordgreen is a Scandinavian watch company that makes beautiful minimalist watches. And the reason I like working with them is because, well, the things that they make are very pretty, but also because they take ethical consumption and low environmental impact very seriously. For example, Nordgreen is officially B Corp certified. That means that they meet very high standards of social and environmental impact. If you buy a watch from them, you can choose which cause you would like to support. So, for example, supplying drink water to villages in the Central African Republic through Water for Good, educating children in India through Pretham UK, or protecting rainforest through Cool Earth. One of their key goals for the future is to become a net zero company, which means cutting greenhouse gas emission to get as close to zero as possible. So if you are looking to buy a watch for yourself or for a friend or a family member as a gift, you should check out Nordgreen. They have endless customization options on their website, so you can pick out the perfect watch. I am currently wearing their native model with a gunmetal casing and a black mesh strap. And I have a discount code for you all, so if you use my code BOOKLEO, you can get 15% off your first purchase, or you can just click the link in my description. Thank you to Nordgreen for sponsoring this video. Hello, I just put a self-assembled pizza in the oven. I made myself a small gin tonic, mostly because I just wanted an excuse to use this beautiful glass that I got from a thrift store. Let's talk about The Serpent and the Wings of Night. I'm 50% through. I bought the 0% sugar tonic. I'm dumb. That's why it doesn't taste good. So, this is my first experience with a book that is actively being promoted as romance fantasy, and I'm gonna be honest, so far I find that there is like a very good balance between actual plot and romance, because the romance kind of, it's like, I would say half-half. I expected fantasy romance to be romance to the same level as, you know, a full-on contemporary romance book is, but it isn't. And I guess that makes sense because you need to take some time to create the world and do some world building and like introduce the readers to all the fantasy elements. Gotta be honest, for me this is kind of the perfect balance where you get all the fun fantasy bits, but a whole lot of, you know, focus on our two main love interests interacting with each other. It feels like Carissa Broadbent watched my videos and was like, let's give Leonie exactly what she wants. It's a tournament style story. We follow Oriya as she enters this tournament where I think only one person can survive to win a wish from the god. And this tournament is just going through multiple trials, which I always love. She's the only human among all of the vampires. And of course one of these vampires is gonna be the love interest, so we get the reluctant allyship between this vampire and the human girl that are trying to work together until at the end, who knows, they have to kill each other eventually. Reluctant allies. This, oh my gosh, it has a slight sunshine grumpy dynamic, but with the girl being the grumpy one and the guy being the sunshine one. I love it. Like, our vampire boy is just one of those kind of snarky, sarcastic, pretty charming, pretty laid back kind of types, whereas our main character Oriya is just like, I'm going to win this and I hate everything and I hate everyone. If you cross me, I will kill you. Love that. And we get a little bit of like teacher, student, master, apprentice thing, because he, the vampire, is kind of teaching our main girl to do some fighting and how they can best like fight together and how she can attack the vampires. And then on top of that, if that wasn't enough already, there's a trope that I love that I didn't even realize I love, is when the world building is what I would like to call mythology based. Pretty soft world building. There's vampires, there's some different houses, and then people have different kinds of magic based around the pantheon of gods. So all the vampires are ruled by the god of the night, and she has been banned from the normal pantheon of gods. And I love it when books use this kind of soft world building that revolves around basically the whims of gods, and the gods are giving them magic, so different people have different magic. But again, the magic is very soft. Like, some people have, like, honestly, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, someone will have magic and it's called Asteris, and it's just like white light and it's very powerful. And then other people have like white fire magic. It's all very ethereal and godly, mythological. It's not like clear, oh, I understand this is an elemental magic system. It's very like that, and I like that. So I've noticed that I read faster on an e-reader, but also this book just makes you read so fast because the stakes, oh my gosh. During my Patreon live show of The Adventures of Amino El Sarifa, we talked about how it can be difficult to raise stakes, and this book is a very perfect example of how to raise stakes. Like, she does it so well. Every single chapter there's some kind of plot twist that just changes everything up. The stakes, for example, first of all, we have our main character who is the only human among all these vampires, which not only makes her like physically weaker than the vampires, it also makes it so that all of these vampires want to kill her because she's a human and they want to drink her blood. One of the first chapters, she kills a contestant, and then a chapter later, a man, like one of the vampire contestants, comes barging in and is like, who killed my brother? I will find the person who killed my brother, which like again adds stakes, where not only is she a human among vampires, she's also made someone really angry over killing their brother, and it just like keeps piling up, and it's so well done. It's been a while since I've read a book where you are just immediately so sucked into it and you just cannot stop, because it's just, the plot twists are flying left and right. I will say the main character is a little bland, but honestly, at this point, I don't really care. Stayed up until 2 a.m. last night reading this book because you know how sometimes you just feel like the characters are gonna kiss soon. You just feel they're gonna have their first moment together. So I kept reading, and then it didn't happen because Carissa Broadbent is too good at writing the slow burn. I love how the Kindle app has this feature where it shows you the most highlighted parts. And in a romance book, you just get to see. Let me just show you. Look, There were over 7,000 people who, in the privacy of their own home, read this and thought, oh yeah, that's a saucy moment. I want to save that for myself. You know, it's private, it's my book. And now I can see that. I can see that this was a popular moment. I feel like I'm reading someone's private diary. I'm turning off my fan for you. That's a huge sacrifice currently. I finished it. Let me just give you an update on like the book itself, and then we'll specifically review the romance. I really enjoyed this. Is it a fantastic masterpiece? No. But was it extremely enjoyable? Well, yes, 100%. I realized that the thing about this book is that everything in this story is just good enough. It's not great, but it's all just good enough. For example, the characters, are they extremely well developed and like super multi-dimensional? No, but they're written just good enough that you really care about them. Is the world building very in-depth? No, not at all, but you're given just enough information that the world lives in your mind and you really have a sense of where you are. The writing isn't like very amazing or original. The writing is pretty generic, but it's just good enough that it really keeps you reading and you're never like annoyed with the writing or anything. That's what I mean when I say everything about this book is just good enough. It's not great, but I feel like this entire story is better than the sum of its parts. Carissa Broadbent knows how to raise the stakes, give you plot twist after plot twist after plot twist. Like for example, at the end there are some very cliche plot twists, but still it's just good enough that you're like, ooh. You know, I was sitting there reading in bed like, whoa, what's happening? And I'm in it, you know, I'm in it. So everything about this book, it's just good enough that this is like, I think, the perfect book to get you out of a reading slump. Now let's talk about the romance. So this is the first time I like deliberately picked up a fantasy romance, and I'm very pleased with the balance between the romance and fantasy, because it's really 50-50. There's an interesting high stakes plot with this like tournament and the trials. We get some cool world building with the gods, which I always love. And then there's just a lot of focus on the romance between our main character and then her enemy in the tournament, Rain. It was the perfect blend between banter, emotions, again really high stakes where you're like, oh my gosh, how are they gonna get out of this, and then a very good and appropriate amount of tension and a bit of spice. Just nice. I will say there's like this little quirk that he has where every time where she's kind of like a stern woman and she's trying to hold herself in, but then every time he kind of provokes her and she says something mean to him, he answers with like, there she is. And this was cute the first 2 or 3 times I encountered it, but it happens so often. Like I started counting, at some point there was 6 pages between him saying it one time and then him saying it again. So this book really set the tone for this video. Let's see where it goes. It's still really hot. I'm gonna turn the fan back on. I am going back to reading physical books, by the way, because however much I really enjoyed reading the ebook format, the iPad does kind of hurt my eyes. So if I'm going to be reading the second book in the Crowns of Nyaxia, so the sequel to The Serpent and the Wings of Dawn, why did I say dawn? The sequel to The Serpent and the Wings of Night. Probably gonna have to read it on my iPad again because it's so difficult to get a copy that's not an ebook. But yeah, it does hurt my eyes. So I am thinking of maybe getting an e-reader because I may have been converted into ebook reading. It's pretty fun. Like a nice way to switch it up. Don't worry, I'm never gonna get rid of the beauty of physical books. I do love it. But an ebook? It's nice. 60 pages into Bitterthorn, and so far the vibes in this one are very different from the other romance fantasy. This one it's very atmospheric, foresty, takes place in a fantasy version of Germany. Gothic, it's a gothic tale, that's what it is. The thing about these kind of books is I love these kinds of atmospheric, autumnal, dark books, and I always tell myself, oh, I should keep these books for autumn, you know, read them during the autumn months because that's the perfect time. But I recently was like, why do I do that? Why do I tell myself that I'm only allowed to read these specific types of book that I really love during one part of the year? So I'm reading it now while it is 30 degrees Celsius in my room. I don't care. We are reading a dark, foresty, autumnal book. See, it even starts out with autumn. But as I saw, like, later in the books we go over the different seasons, so at some point at the end of the story we will get the summer. The vibes will match my current vibes. I'm just trying to survive while the heat keeps going up in my apartment. I just love a love interest that's a villain. I just love that the love interest is this evil witch in the forest, and she's very alluring and dark and kind of has an interest in our main character, who's the first female companion that she's ever taken. So yeah, I think I'm gonna eat this little romance up. I think I'm gonna eat it up. What I love seeing a lot in romances between two women that I would love to see more of in romances that involve a man is there's a little bit more focus on the humanity on the love interest, and the love interest isn't always this flawless, beautiful, gorgeous god of a man. Like, for example, I really love this description of the witch, our love interest from our main character. I remember seeing her for the first time and being so shocked to see someone so unearthly beautiful. But then it's followed by, now all I saw was someone so acutely human. In the chapped skin of her lips, the lines beside her eyes, the bitten quicks of her nails, and the rapid rise and fall of her chest as she breathed. Okay, it is slowly getting a little bit less warm, which is good because my body feels like it is disintegrating at the core. Okay, so Bitterthorn, so far, I'm about halfway into it, and it's very gothic and lush and beautiful, right up my alley. It really reminds me of stories like Beauty and the Beast and Bluebeard, which are some of my favorite fairy tales. We have some mystery elements because our main character is trying to figure out what is going on in the witch's tower, which is the only place she's not allowed to go. So everything about this book is right up my alley, but it just feels like there's something missing. It feels like the story takes place inside a glass cage, and as I'm reading, I'm inside of that cage, but I can see through the glass all of the territory that this book could have explored but didn't. There's nothing in this book so far that really sets it apart from other gothic stories that I've read. Like, for example, you know, there's a little bit of magic in here, but it doesn't feel living and breathing and anything that is specific to this book. You know, we have our typical gothic castle that feels alive and is changing, but there's nothing that sets this gothic castle apart from all the other gothic mansions and castles that I've read about. We have our young girl main character, whose name I keep forgetting, Mina, who's trying to figure out the secrets of the person that she lives with, in this case the witch. Who is she? Like, who is Mina? I don't feel like I truly know her. I don't feel like there's anything about her that is gonna make me remember her as someone that is different from all the other gothic female main characters. And if you're not like super connected to the main character, then it's gonna also make it very hard to like fully get the romance, you know what I mean? Okay, this book actually ended up being very nice. I think I was a little bit harsh in the last clips because I felt like this book could have been, you know, a new favorite, but instead of being a new favorite, it just ended up being a good book, but not like a new favorite. Let's talk about the romance. It's very different from Serpent and the Wings of Night. It airs more on the, you know, like beautiful emotional side than the like fun bantery side of things. But I did really enjoy it. It is like most of these kind of stories, technically Stockholm Syndrome, you know. Our main character Mina falls in love with the witch because she's, you know, not completely mean to her and like takes care of her even though she's her captor. So we're just, you know what, I feel like it's a common rule amongst every Beauty and the Beast like gothic tale that we just don't think about Stockholm Syndrome. I did think the romance progressed super fast. Technically it did progress very slowly, as in it goes over like multiple months. It's just that the writing style is super fast paced and we just like barrel through many months in like half of the book. So it feels like our main character is like immediately in love with this witch, but it's because months have passed. I really noticed that these characters often, when they have scenes together, the scenes don't last longer than 1 or 2 pages. So we just get little glimpses into their relationship instead of like good long scenes where we're really developing the interactions between the two. I did really like the romance. It was very clearly built on mutual respect, and what it really comes down to, and especially towards the end of the book, like my heart, it really just is about 2 very lonely women finding solace in each other. And I would say loneliness is one of the biggest themes of this story. And I love seeing 2 characters slowly grow towards each other through small shared moments, like having breakfast together or sitting together by the fireplace in the evening. I did end up really enjoying this one. The last book I read, I'd actually been listening to as an audiobook throughout this video. It is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This story felt very different in tone from the other romance fantasy books I read, with its melancholic undercurrent. We follow the love story between 2 young rival journalists who send letters to each other through an enchanted typewriter, without knowing that it is their rival that they're actually writing to. One day, as ancient gods awake and spread their wrath over the country, war breaks out. The story explores grief and family and danger through the letters of these 2 young journalists and how they experience the war. I really kind of have to get used to the tone of this book because this was mostly marketed to me as rivals to lovers. So when I hear rivals to lovers, I really think like banter and competition. I think Jake and Amy from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but that's like really not what's going on here. There's not a lot of animosity between these 2 young journalists. It's mostly just that they're both competing for like a position at the Gazette that they both work at. And honestly, they stop being rivals about 25% of the way through the book, and I'm saying that just so you can kind of like manage your expectations. It's just so much more than just a rivals to lovers book that I don't want to market it to you that way. So although at first Divine Rivals wasn't really what I had hoped it to be, it ended up surprising me with how touching it was. At its heart, it's a story about finding joy in times of hopelessness and finding new love even after it's been taken from you many times. This book is gonna make me cry. So yeah, I would actually highly recommend this book if you're looking for a romance on the more emotional, touching side, because I thought this was very beautiful. Hello, I want to end this video with a little bit of a discussion about what I think of the fantasy romance genre and comparing it to other things, because I've been seeing a little bit of a discussion on TikTok and Instagram Reels about the fantasy romance genre, and especially comparing it to something called romantasy, because apparently there's a difference. From what I've understood, fantasy romance, so the books that I've been reading in this video, are romance first and fantasy second. You know, like the books that I focused on, they're fantasy books, but most of the focus is on the fact that it's a romance. And then there's romance fantasy, or very neatly shorthanded as romantasy. I love that word, romantasy, are fantasy first and romance second, or as some people refer to it, just like fantasy books with a romance subplot. Do you follow me? You know, I think it's cool that this distinction is there. It fulfills different needs. You know, sometimes you just mostly want to read a fantasy book, and sometimes you really want something that focuses more on the romance. But it is especially fantasy romance that is super popular on TikTok and Reels, you know, with like ACOTAR, Fourth Wing. These are all fantasy romance books. And as a response to that, I've been seeing also a little bit of pushback against this, of people kind of looking down on these romance focused fantasy books. Specifically, I recently saw a reel, and I'm not going to show it here because no hate to the creator, but basically the idea of the reel was like, oh, when you're reading a fantasy book and it turns out to mostly just be romance and you're like, oh no, I don't want that. No hate to the original creator, like I totally get that if you have different expectations from what the book turns out being. I totally get that you're gonna be disappointed, but it was mostly the comments that kind of got to me. It was basically just people hating on romance fantasy. No, fantasy romance. This is confusing. You know, it's trashy fantasy romance, authors going crazy with their fetishes, it's a weird genre, it's just shit. And I just wanted to talk about it here because it really feels like just people are yet again falling into this trend of assuming that everything with a lot of romance is inherently trashy. This idea that books that focus a lot on romance or even have spice included in them, they can never be good books. Maybe fun books, but never good books. A lot of these comments are just straight up very sex negative. This idea that if a book contains any kind of spice, that makes it like gross or weird. And I think this is just gonna lead to more women feeling shame around having any kind of desires, as if society doesn't shame us enough already for these kind of things. So I just wanted to point this out, that I kind of disagree with this sentiment. Don't get me wrong, I totally understand not wanting to read a romance heavy fantasy book. Maybe you're just young and you don't like the spice, or maybe it's just really not your thing and you're not looking for it, or maybe some of these people are dealing with their own shame and are kind of pulling others with them. Whatever your reason, there's absolutely nothing wrong with not enjoying fantasy that has like a lot of romance in them. I just don't like it when people are painting romance heavy fantasies as inferior to other fantasies. I just want to mention in this video that I don't agree with that sentiment, because I know like the point of this video is that I try to read romance fantasy books because I don't like a lot of the popular ones. I don't like the way they're written, or I don't like the way that their romances are portrayed. But I just want to make it clear that I don't dislike them because they're romance heavy. I have no problem with that. And I achieved my goal with this video because I read 3 romance fantasy books that I really enjoyed, and they all had very different vibes. The Serpent and the Wings of Night have more like tense, flirty romance vibes, which is my personal favorite. I prefer these kind of vibes. And then Bitterthorn and Divine Rivals have more emotional, grand love story vibes. And I feel like all 3 of these books had a pretty even 50-50 split between the romance and then the other aspects of the story, you know, like the fantasy elements or the character elements, family elements, etc. There's really great ones out there for everyone. I would recommend all 3 of the books that I read in this video. So honestly, success. Anyway, if you like talking to me about books and you want to do it more often, you can subscribe to the channel. I want to give a thank you to all of my patrons who are supporting the channel, with a very special thank you to all of my Elite Hidden Library members, and a warm welcome to our newest Elite Hidden Library member, KJ. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. KJ? KJ. If you want to join the book club over at my Patreon, I will leave a link for that in the description. And in about 2 weeks, we're going to be discussing our next book club book, which is going to be The Bell Jar, and I'm very excited about that. So thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you soon in another video very soon. Goodbye.